Before I start out this video, I want to issue you all a warning. This video contains a lot of spoilers, not just for the base game of Elden Ring, but also major spoilers for the Shadow of the Erdtree DLC. So please, if you haven't played Shadow of the Erdtree yet, and you don't want it to get spoiled, then stop this video right now and go play the DLC and then come back. You've been warned. One other thing I want to mention before we get started as well is that this video is part 2 of a 3-part Elden Ring boss ranking. I'll link parts 1 and 3 in the description down below. And in case you didn't stick around to the end of my last video, well, I actually did a face reveal in the previous video. And, well, this isn't exactly a great picture of me, but here's a picture of me. Yeah, that's what I look like IRL. But anyway, let's continue on with the rankings starting at number 25. Kicking off part 2 of the list, and the great tier, we've got Commander Neil. Commander Neil is the boss of Castle Sol, which is a mini-dungeon found in the mountaintops of the Giants, and honestly, this boss fight might be the only part of the mountaintops of the Giants that's actually worthwhile. Commander Neil is also pretty much like the much less annoying and much more enjoyable version of Commander O'Neill, who was found in the Swamp of Aeonia in Caelid. One of the biggest things the two bosses have in common is their gimmick of being able to summon other enemies during the fight, and of the two, Commander Neil does it much better in my opinion. Instead of summoning basic fodder that'll blow over if you do so much as sneeze on them, Commander Neil summons 2 banished knights into the arena at the start of the fight. These enemies are absolutely no pushover and can be difficult to face even into the late game, so having 2 at once sounds like it would be a nightmare until you remember that you're also able to use Spirit Ashes to summon an enemy to help fight alongside you as well. This turns what was a 1v3 into a 2v3, which I really like. It feels fantastic to go into battle with your Spirit Ash and Commander Neil being able to use Spirit Ashes as well. It feels like this fight was very much designed with the intention of you using Spirit Ashes, which is a pretty interesting idea in my opinion. It also helps out that the Banished Knights are some of my personal favorite non-boss enemies in Elden Ring. For me, summoning a Spirit Ash and taking on the Banished Knights and Commander Neil at the same time is the closest thing in the base game to getting to experience multiplayer while being offline, but maybe that's just because of my chronic lack of friends. I'm only half joking about that part. But anyway, once you've managed to kill both of the Banished Knights, the rest of the fight is still a real treat in my eyes. In a lot of ways, Commander Neil feels a lot like a classic Souls boss, but with a few twists. He isn't quite as fast as many other Elden Ring bosses, and his attacks are far more slow and deliberate, but despite the slow pacing of his attacks with his halberd still has quite a long range to it, and it can be pretty devastating if you get caught in a chain of his attacks. His swinging and thrusting attacks with his halberd that he chains together often are for the most part fairly telegraphed and pretty straightforward to avoid, save for this one jab attack that comes out pretty quickly with the other end of his halberd. I don't know what it is about this one move, but it's nearly impossible to avoid from my experience. I don't know, I guess I just suck at avoiding it. Maybe I just need to get good. Aside from that though, he has several AoE attacks where he either stomps into the ground or spins his halberd around. When he does this, he summons a cloud of frostbite around him to punish you in case you've been too close to him for too long. This means that you'll want to keep at least a somewhat decent distance away from him during the fight in order to avoid the AoEs when they come out, and with his spinning AoE in particular, he follows it up oftentimes by charging towards the player and smashing his halberd down onto the ground. And once you get him below a certain health threshold, Commander Neil gains another new ability. That being, he's able to use his own prosthesis like a weapon once you get him below a certain point of health. He imbues his prosthesis with the power of lightning and then either follows up his stomp AoE by jumping up into the air and smashing the ground with his prosthesis, or he just straight up swings it at you. These attacks are by far the most dangerous moves in Commander Neil's moveset, because not only will you be hit with the blade of the prosthesis upon a failed dodge, but also the lightning that follows after. However, even though these attacks are pretty dangerous to the player, they're not unfair either, because both of them have pretty long wind-ups, so you know they're coming and you have a good amount of time to prepare for them. And as far as Elden Ring bosses go, Commander Neil isn't really all that aggressive, surprisingly, so you actually have plenty of time to be able to attack him as well as to heal yourself after a failed dodge. Combine that with the telegraphed and deliberate nature of pretty much every single one of his attacks, and you have a boss that, while challenging, doesn't have anything really unbalanced about it. There's nothing really special about him when it comes to the presentation or his backstory, but because of just how much I love his gameplay, he's gotta be a great tier boss. And if anything, my only complaint is just how underrated Commander Neil is. Seriously, I just wish the community would appreciate him more, because he's a really great fight. But anyway, because of all the reasons I listed, I decided to put him at number 25 on the list. Number 24, the Godskin Apostle. This boss can actually be encountered in two locations in the game. The first location you'll likely find it in is in Dominula, the Windmill Village on the Altus Plateau. The second place you can encounter this boss is in the basement of the Divine Tower of Caelid. Normally I'd be pretty annoyed at a boss getting repeated like this, however it's explicitly stated in the lore that there are multiple Godskin Apostles, so I'm fine with it, and it makes enough sense. Now right off the bat, I just really love the way this thing is designed, with all of the skin of the gods draped over it like some sort of cloak obscuring its face. It looks both cool but also really creepy at the same time. And similar to Commander Neil from the previous entry, the Godskin Apostle in a lot of ways feels a lot like a classic Souls boss. The Godskin Apostle wields a twin blade called the Godskin Peeler, which doubles both as a slashing weapon but also a thrusting weapon at the same time. The slash attacks with the weapon come out slower and are more telegraphed, but they tend to hit harder, and along with that, the thrusting attacks tend to deal less damage, but they come out faster and in quick succession to each other. So in a lot of ways, the Godskin Apostle is very similar to the Godskin Noble from the previous video. However, there is a bit of a difference. For one thing, the Godskin Apostle is much smaller, meaning it's much harder to abuse the size of the boss. Another thing is that the Godskin Apostle is more agile, being able to leap up in the air and do jump attacks with the weapon, and along with that, it's also able to jump backwards right after landing an attack. The way it moves around with the twin blade is also remarkably different, being much less stationary and being far more graceful with it, almost like some sort of weird dance. The Apostle's attacks just chain together beautifully in my opinion, and I just really love the way this thing moves, seriously. It's also got a special attack with the twin blade where it's able to spin it around up close, meaning that you can't always just be right up in its face. But don't think that means you can just be at a distance the entire time either, because the Godskin Apostle can throw a ball of black flame at you, and when that hits you, it'll actually deplete your health over time for a short while. There's also a two-hit combo the boss can do where it jabs its peeler forward and then immediately rips it back before you can fully recover from the first move, meaning you'll get hit by both moves if you don't dodge correctly. And you can't just spam roll your way to victory either, because while the boss isn't slow, its attacks have enough of a delay to them to catch you at the end of your roll if you start spam rolling. The best strategy with this fight from my experience is to try and stay at a close distance but not be right in front of the boss, and instead dodge into one of its sides when it starts attacking. It's also best to avoid spam rolling like I just said, and instead try to learn the tells as much as you can to get your dodge timing down. It's also important to avoid getting too greedy with your attacks, because if you go for too many hits at a time, you'll definitely get hit by one of its moves. Once the boss gets below a certain health threshold though, the fight actually changes up a decent bit, as it's now able to elongate its torso to a certain length. This means that now when it starts doing its spinning attack, it'll actually start stretching across the room, meaning now you pretty much have to be at a close distance to win. It also gains several new Black Flame attacks, the first of which is the Black Flame Tornado AoE attack, which is one of the most dangerous AoE attacks in the game. If you don't have a shield and you aren't able to get away from the AoE in time, it's pretty much a guaranteed death, and even if you do have a shield and block it, it will absolutely decimate the amount of health you have. It's also able to elongate its torso now and spin around, creating a trail of black flame around it, which once again slowly depletes your health once it hits you. But even if the fight is pretty tough, once again, it's still completely fair because you're given plenty of opportunities to attack as well as heal yourself. As long as you don't get too greedy with attacks, and as long as you don't spam roll your way to victory, you're pretty much guaranteed to win with enough patience. And because of just how much I really like this fight, I decided to put it at number 24. Well, it's that time again. First cutscene of the video, baby! Make sure you grab your popcorn.
Foul tarnished. In search of the Elden Ring. Emboldened by the flame of ambition.
Yep, right at number 23, we've got Margit the Fell Omen, who is likely to be the first major boss that players will encounter on their playthrough. Firstly, right off the bat, I just want to say that the way this fight is set up is really clever in my opinion. Margit is nearly impossible if you go to him straight away, and that's on purpose by design. If you follow the path the game sets for you at first, you'll end up encountering Margit, and you'll likely hit a brick wall because of how difficult he is so early on in the game. The reason why it's set up this way is to encourage you to go around and explore more of Limgrave and the Weeping Peninsula and then come back once you've gotten stronger. I think the way they went about teaching this was really smart, and it helps teach the player in a more natural way than just giving them a text prompt or something. The fight's obviously much less difficult now that I have experience with the game, however that doesn't mean that it's bad in any way. In fact, the fight is still great on repeat playthroughs. Margit is slower than a lot of the bosses that come after him, and he's not quite as aggressive, but he still is aggressive towards the player. And along with that, his attacks have just enough of a delay to them to punish spam rollers and force the player to actually learn his moveset. And you can't just run away from him either, because his staff has quite a long reach, so if you try to run away, you'll just end up getting hit still. And that's neglecting to mention that he has a move where he actually runs after the player and then swings his staff at them, so he'll absolutely close the distance if you run. Your best bet is to definitely try and stay closer to Margit, just like many other bosses in the game that I've mentioned up until now. However, you also can't just abuse his size, and if you try doing that, you'll likely get hit in the face by his tail that he can swipe at you. His slower moving staff isn't the only weapon he has at his disposal either, as he actually has a golden dagger during the first phase as well, which he can swing at you from up close, and also throw at you from a distance. All of this in the first phase sounds like it's a lot to deal with, and it kind of is, especially on the first playthrough. However, Margit also pauses a decent amount during this fight as well, meaning that your healing and attack windows are pretty generous. All of his combos with his staff chain together wonderfully in my opinion, and they're perfectly designed to help a player get used to Elden Ring's flow of combat more. And with the way he's designed, instead of making a player frustrated when they die to him, he helps show them exactly how they died without actually saying the reason why, and I really like that. Additionally, Margit introduces the concept of a second phase to the player, as once he gets below a certain threshold of health, he'll enter into his second phase. In the second phase, he gains even more combos, not just with his staff, but 2 more weapons he can now create, that being a golden longsword and a giant golden hammer. The attacks with the hammer are really slow and deliberate, but they hit hard, and the combos he has with his golden longsword are more fast, and you have to be absolutely on point with your dodge timing. Margit also becomes significantly more aggressive in the second phase, however, that's when you might learn a thing or two about the Spirit Ash mechanic, because, well, you're able to summon Spirit Ashes for this fight, and doing so is a pretty good idea in my opinion. Once you summon the Spirit Ash, it'll actually help break Margit's aggro on you and help him focus on a different target. And the decision to put Margit right outside of Stormveil Castle was not only really good for helping the player be prepared for the first Legacy dungeon of the game, but also it helps out wonderfully with the visuals in my opinion. Seriously, seeing the giant Stormveil Castle looming over the arena surrounded by a bunch of wind is just really awesome. This fight also helps to establish a relationship between the player and this character because, spoiler alert, this is not the last time we'll be encountering Margit. For one, we encounter him again on the Altus Plateau right outside of Leyndell. Some people would call it lazy, but well, it makes enough sense given what Margit is. Because, well, Margit isn't actually a person. Margit is an Omen illusion and alter ego of Morgoth, the Omen King, who we face at the halfway point of the game. And, not to spoil anything about this list, but you might end up seeing Morgoth much later on. But overall, Margit the Fell Omen is just a fantastic early game boss and a great fight on repeat playthroughs, earning him the number 23 spot. You know what, there's a lot of bosses on this list that have opening cutscenes, so I don't think I'm gonna announce the rest of them, I'm just gonna let them play, so roll the clip.
Mighty dragon, thou art a true-born heir. Lend me thy strength, O kindred. Deliver me unto greater heights. Well. Plain as a lord. I command thee, kneel! I am the lord of all that is golden.
Yep, for the number 22 spot, we've got Godric the Grafted, and that opening cutscene is unironically terrifying to me. Godric is the first Shardbearer boss fight that'll be encountered in the game, and he guards Godric's Great Rune, and along with that, he's also the main boss of Stormveil Castle, which is an excellent legacy dungeon in my opinion, but I'll save that discussion for later. He's the next major boss in the game right after Margit, and while he is easier than Margit in my opinion, he's also a lot more fun. I also just want to say real quick, but his design is just incredible, seriously. It's grotesque and disturbing, but also just looks really cool at the same time. There's also a good bit of visual storytelling with his design. Godric stole the limbs and other body parts of different people and other creatures in order to try and gain more power for himself. and you can see on his body just how badly he's mutilated himself and how badly he's messed himself up doing so. In phase 1 of the fight, Godric can do a variety of different moves involving the 2 axes he's holding, which come out faster than a boss of this size would suggest. He's able to use the Stormcaller attack where he creates a tornado around himself briefly before leaping up into the air and smashing back down, which is pretty easily avoidable, I will say. He's able to roll around, then swing his axe into the ground at you. He can smash his axe into the ground, which raises earth from beneath him, which you have to jump over instead of dodging through. And many of his regular axe swings are a bit slow, but he's also able to combo them together, and along with that, he's able to swipe his arm at you as well. And while some of his attacks can be slow, a lot of his combos can come out rather quickly after a bit of a delay, which is pretty nice. Sadly though, it can be a little bit easy to spam roll through a lot of his attacks, which is a shame. He's also able to drag his axe along the ground and then swing it up, which then sends a blast of air at you, which can be especially dangerous. As you're probably able to tell, his moveset is pretty complex for a boss so early in the game, and once you get him below a certain health threshold, this happens. And fair warning, this second phase cutscene is really fucking horrific, so if you're sensitive to violence and stuff like that, skip to this timestamp to skip past it.
Truest of dragons, lend me thy strength.
Yeah, that might just win the award for the single most brutal second phase transition in the entire game, because, you know, it's not every day you see a dude rip the head off a dragon then put it on his arm, like, dear god! In the second phase, all of Godric's wind-based attacks also have fire mixed into them as well, and alongside that, the dragon is also able to spew out fire during the fight, which can be pretty dangerous. He also gains a new grab attack, which is responsible for probably the single biggest WTF moment I've ever had playing this game. Here's the clip.
Return together to our home, bathed in rays of cold.
Yeah, don't ask me how exactly that ended up happening, because I do not have an answer for you. It was pretty weird. But aside from that, pretty much the same strategy from Phase 1 still applies, and overall, I just really love Godric as a boss, so I decided to put him at number 22. There's one little thing I forgot to mention though. Inside the Golden Lineage Everjail on the Altus Plateau, there's a little boss called Godefroy the Grafted, and yeah, just take a look at it. Seriously, come on, just... What? Come on, Miyazaki, like... I thought we learned from Estelle. You know what? Fuck it. Come on. creeping her way right on in at number 21, we've got Metyr, Mother of Fingers. Out of all the bosses in the Shadow of the Erdtree DLC, this one is by far the easiest to miss, as it's locked behind a pretty lengthy questline as well as an NPC invasion. But even if it takes a while to reach this boss, I definitely say it's worth your time, because this is honestly a pretty great fight in my eyes. First off, just take a look at her design. Seriously, Metyr's design is just, ooh! This might genuinely be the creepiest boss design in all of Elden Ring. For a game with a mostly medieval-inspired setting, Elden Ring has a fair amount of cosmic horror sprinkled into it, and Metyr is by far the best example of it in my opinion. The arena is just hauntingly beautiful as well, and it really helps elevate the feeling that you're going against some sort of cosmic entity rather than just a normal monster. The description of her remembrance that she drops upon death describes her not only as being the mother of the two fingers, but also being a, quote, magnificently gleaming daughter of the greater will. And if this is what's described as being a magnificently gleaming daughter of the greater will, then I don't want to know what the greater will itself actually looks like. Although I do also feel genuinely sorry for Metyr, because it's stated in the lore as well that she was abandoned by the greater will for seemingly no reason, which is pretty sad. Thematically though, Metyr is fantastic when it comes to lore, as she fits in perfectly with the themes of motherhood and abandonment the DLC went with. In terms of gameplay, I've heard a lot of people have really mixed feelings about Metyr, but honestly, I really like her gameplay. She feels almost more like a boss designed for Bloodborne than Elden Ring, but I mean that as a compliment. In Phase 1, Metyr's moveset is fairly limited but fairly solid. At a distance, she's able to fire a laser at you, which can be pretty dangerous and makes it so you have to get at least a little bit close to her. But once you're close to her, you'll still have to deal with her variety of swiping and smashing attacks from her arms as well as her head. She's also able to jump around the arena, so be wary of that as well. And pro tip, don't try to stick to her side and abuse her size, because, well, you might get hit by her finger leg things. She's also able to birth finger creepers into the arena, which is, that's kinda disgusting, actually. It's making me question whether or not the wound on her body is really just her nether regions. I should probably stop thinking about this. Metyr is a fairly average boss when it comes to aggression, but unlike most bosses in Elden Ring, Metyr does not have many delayed attacks at all. Her attacks barely have any delay to them, in fact, and come out relatively quickly. This results in a different kind of challenge than most bosses in the game, because instead of trying to just counter the moveset and learn the delays, instead it's trying to keep up with the speed of the fight. And along with that, learning the tells for her attacks is much trickier than it would be otherwise, because now you don't have super obvious tells to rely on. And once you get her below a certain health threshold, she'll enter into her phase 2, and right away she begins it off with a super dangerous AoE attack, which is very difficult to avoid. Seriously, Metyr, you're an asshole. The music also undergoes a bit of an unnerving change. It starts out all grand in Phase 1, but then just becomes really quiet and disturbing in Phase 2. It really helps sell the whole Lovecraftian vibe of Metyr, and I really like that. Metyr also gains several new moves, the first of which is a move where she flies around then spins back onto the ground, a new head slam which has an AoE following it, as well as one attack that's become really infamous among the Elden Ring community. You know the one, it's the giant quasar she summons. Oh, and funny story, there was footage I had of this attack, but now it's completely gone. Yeah, thanks a lot, Google Drive, you're really being helpful here. The Quasar attack in particular has become pretty infamous because it is one of the hardest attacks to avoid in the entire game, so yeah, I don't really like it all that much. Another attack she gains in her second phase is a really unique one where she summons mini black holes throughout the arena which then explode after a short while. The attack looks really cool and can be a little tricky to avoid, but it's nothing too unfair. Something a bit strange I noticed about Meteor is that whenever you beat her, she doesn't seem to die, and instead she seems to escape through the microcosm, which is a little weird. And overall, Meteor the Mother of Fingers is a really challenging boss fight that has really good gameplay, some amazing visuals, and along with that, some really interesting lore, so I think it's only fair to give her number 21. And at number 20, we've got the Putrescent Knight. Another DLC boss makes the list, this one being found at the end of the stone coffin fissure hidden under the Cerulean coast. You don't have to kill this boss in order to be able to beat the DLC, but if you want to be able to finish one of the main NPC questlines and access St. Trina, you've got to take this boss on. Right off the bat, this thing has probably the single most bizarre visual design in the entire game for me. It looks like some sort of fat, bony orphan of Kos riding on a gray, melty horse with some sort of weird head, and I don't know, it looks pretty odd. In Phase 1 of the fight, the Putrescent Knight's moveset mostly consists of it swinging its weapon at you while on horseback, throwing its weapon at you and having it come back like a boomerang, and things like that. This might sound pretty standard for the most part, and it kind of is, but there is a bit of a twist on the formula. The way the Putrescent Knight moves is very unnatural in this phase. And by that, I don't mean his combos don't chain together very well, because they absolutely do. This fight has a pretty good flow to it. What I mean is the timing of the attacks is really weird. They almost always end up coming out faster or slower than I expect, and along with that, the way they're telegraphed is just unlike anything else in the game for me. I don't even know how to describe it. And for me, the way he holds his weapon over his head makes it really difficult to tell when he's actually getting ready to attack and when he's not. He's also got a pretty unique attack where he jumps off his horse then spins at you like a Beyblade. Then once he does that, his horse jumps up from the ground then charges at you. He then repeats this twice before he's done. The dodge timing for this attack is really tight, however, I find it really fun to be able to successfully avoid this attack, I don't know. At 2/3 or so health, the Putrescent Knight enters into Phase 2 with a bunch of new AoE attacks involving Ghost Flame. Pretty much he spreads Ghost Flame along the floor in specific patterns which you have to jump over instead of dodge through. You can dodge through it as well, but it's easier to just jump over it. This means you have to play a little more cautiously in the second phase, however the strategy remains mostly the same. It's not the most spectacular or challenging fight in the DLC, but it's still great honestly, and I still really like the gameplay of it. And plus, I just really love everything about the way the boss is presented. It feels creepy and weird, but in the best way possible. And so, in my opinion, I believe the Putrescent Knight deserves to be at number 20. And now at number 19, we have the Shadow Tree Avatar. I've seen the community generally have mixed feelings about this boss, so some of you might be a bit surprised to see it placed this high up on the list, and I'll be honest, I really didn't like the fight on my first playthrough, but I've come to appreciate it more with time. Now to finish the Shadow of the Erdtree DLC, you don't technically have to kill the Shadow Tree Avatar, however, I definitely recommend killing it because it drops an item that'll be very important for the DLC's final boss. And yes, I'm fully aware that this is probably the easiest remembrance boss in the DLC, however that doesn't mean it's just a pushover, and that doesn't mean I'm going to dislike the fight. The boss's attacks are mostly moves having to do with swiping its arms. It's able to swipe its arms at you from a distance and hit you. It's able to swipe its arms along the ground and then send thorns after you, which cause blood loss. It can do an AoE attack where it plunges its arm into the ground and then shoots thorns upwards. And some of its regular arm swipes leave a trail of thorns behind it. It has a bunch of other attacks related to thorns which incentivizes much more patience than usual, because if you're impatient then you'll get hit with the thorns, and once the blood loss meter fully builds up, you'll lose a percentage of your health immediately. The Shadow Tree Avatar can also use ranged attacks, however its ranged attacks are probably the least threatening moves in its moveset because they're fairly easy to avoid. The fight does have a specific gimmick to it though, similar to the Fire Giant from the last video, however it does the gimmick much better. Pretty much if you try to attack the body of the Shadow Tree Avatar, you'll be out of luck because its resistances are pretty high on its body. However, if you attack its head, you'll notice that your attacks deal a lot more damage. Pretty much this takes abusing the size of the boss completely out of the equation, and you'll just have to target its head and stay in its face. You do still have to watch out for its head slams and stuff like that though, and it has a grab attack it can do with it, which can be pretty dangerous. And once you get this rhythm down, you'll end up eventually killing the boss. However, you'll be in for a nice little surprise once you do. Come on now. Did you really think it would be that simple? Once you kill the Shadow Tree Avatar for the first time, it pops back up with a fraction of its full health. The second phase is mostly the same as the first phase, but it has a brand new charge attack it can do with a fair amount of delay to it that does quite a bit of damage if you get hit by it. But again, use the same strategy you used in phase 1, and then boom, it's back for round 3. Except this time, things are a little different. It gains a new AoE attack which you have to dodge multiple times, but after it does it, it falls to the ground for a second. Almost like it's exhausted. And the music goes from being bombastic and cool to just being somber and sad. It's like the fight is telling me a story without a single cutscene or line of dialogue. Even though we don't really know much of anything about the Shadow Tree Avatar in terms of its lore, and along with that, it is just a giant sunflower monster, but I don't know, the third phase just makes me feel genuinely sorry for it. It's probably the most guilty I've ever felt about killing a literal sunflower. Overall, I just really like the gameplay of the fight, and I just love the wordless storytelling that was incorporated, so I decided to put the boss at number 19. Next up at number 18, we've got Romina, Saint of the Bud. Well, would you look at that, we've got the third DLC boss in a row to be up in Great Tier. Seriously, that is impressive. Romina in particular is found at the end of the ancient ruins of Ra, which is for me one of the best open world zones in Elden Ring. When I first encountered Romina, I was completely caught off guard and I thought that she didn't appear in any of the trailers for the DLC at all. But then I decided to rewatch the story trailer, and it turns out you can actually see Romina in the story trailer before she transformed into the monstrosity she is now. Obviously, this is a pretty subtle and small detail to point out, and it doesn't really impact the fight at all, seeing as it is just from the trailers, but I do still think it is really nice. But even putting the trailers and Romina's awesome looking design aside, her fight is actually really fun. During the first phase of the fight, Romina feels a lot like a Dark Souls boss. Her attacks are mostly pretty delayed and telegraphed, but also have very deliberate timing to them, which is not a bad thing by any means. Romina's lower body has two main halves to it, one being the front of a centipede and the other being a tail of a scorpion, both of which she uses during the fight. She's also got many different swings with her spear and such, and along with that she's got a stinger at the bottom of her body. One thing she's able to do is fly up into the air and extend her stinger out before a red flash happens and she slams back down onto the ground with her stinger out. The dodge timing on this attack is pretty easy to get down as there's a red flash that happens when you're supposed to dodge, and honestly, even if it makes dodging the attack easier, it feels very satisfying to pull off. She also has a roll attack she can pull off, which thankfully doesn't last quite as long as the Godskin Noble's never-ending roll. As well as that, for a boss of this size and appearance, Romina has a surprisingly threatening amount of agility. Along with this as well, Romina has one other trick up her sleeve which makes her very threatening despite not being super difficult. The trick Romina has up her sleeve is that her spear attacks will cause a slow buildup of Scarlet Rot. Normally I would hate this, but I don't know, I feel like the way it was implemented into this fight is really good. Getting fully afflicted with the Scarlet Rot sucks, yeah, however these attacks that inflict it can be avoided easily with enough situational awareness. And despite how janky Romina's attacks can sometimes look, I feel like the hitboxes are actually pretty decent. I don't know, I've never really had any issue with them. You can, of course, use Spirit Ashes for this boss fight, but Romina tends to eat through them fairly quickly, but even with that, Romina is completely fair and balanced to fight solo as well. And of course, once you get Romina below 2/3 health or so, she'll enter into her second phase. This second phase, of course, begins with a massive Scarlet Butterfly AoE, which, once done, will inflict Scarlet Rot if you're caught up in it. This AoE, however, has a very long wind-up to it, meaning you're given ample time to be able to run away from it and not be hit by it. The second phase has much more emphasis put on Romina's wings than the other parts of her body, and she'll utilize them by flying up in the air and swinging her spear around. The attacks can feel a little bit tricky to avoid, but it's not even just the attacks themselves you have to worry about avoiding. When she does these flying spear swings, she also leaves a trail of butterflies behind which will explode after a few seconds, inflicting Scarlet Rot. This gives her flying attacks an X factor to them. If you mess up your dodge timing, not only will you be hit with her spear, but also with the butterflies that follow after. Even if Romina isn't the hardest boss in the world, she's just really enjoyable to fight, and something about her just gets me tense and anxious every single time I fight her. The only complaint I really have is just how underexplored she is in the game's lore. She doesn't even have a cutscene or a single line of dialogue at all. This hurts her placement a little bit, however the gameplay is just so good that she's gotta be a great tier boss. Alright, correct me if I'm wrong, but I'm pretty sure basically all of us got super hyped up our first time seeing this boss. Some of you may be a bit surprised to see me place Radagon in Great Tier instead of Legendary Tier, however, I have my own reasons. Before I get to that though, I think I have to clarify something. Even though most people consider Radagon and the Elden Beast to both be two phases of the same greater final boss fight, I decided to consider them as separate bosses for the list, given how different they are. I personally prefer the Elden Beast over Radagon, and yes, I know that is a bit of an unpopular opinion, however, even if Radagon were the only final boss of the game, he still would have held up. When it comes to his style of attacking, this sexy redhead has all of the best trademarks of Elden Ring boss attacks in my opinion. He's got the delayed timings which incentivize patience as well as careful dodging, a high level of aggression that adds to the tension of the fight and stops you from just constantly spamming the attack button, carefully telegraphed AoEs that reward better positioning, and so on and so forth. And this is just describing his melee attacks as well. He doesn't just have melee attacks, he also has ranged attacks that he can use against you. Probably the most common one that he uses is his golden lightning that he can throw at you or slam into the ground. When he slams the lightning into the ground, it'll actually result in a lingering AoE that does damage on contact. His AoEs are nothing to scoff at either, and in particular this one chain of AoEs he can actually pull off. Pretty much Radagon will jump into the air and then slam his hammer back onto the ground, creating a region of damage around him. Then he does it again. Then finally he winds up for the final one, which is an imprint of the Elden Ring itself, which is really cool. This chain of AoEs is brutal, and it's seriously difficult to dodge. Seriously, I almost always get hit by at least one of them. The fight already feels tense because of its fast pacing as well as its brutal punishment. However, there's an additional factor to all of this. Radagon is able to teleport randomly around the arena, which adds a bit of unpredictability to him and adds to the tension of the fight. In my opinion, they perfected the whole final boss feeling with Radagon as well as with the Elden Beast. However, unfortunately, I do have one issue with Radagon. That issue is that his moveset started to feel a little bit predictable at times, even with his unpredictable teleporting. His attacks just eventually start to kind of blend together in my mind and feel a little bit too samey for a final boss. He's not the final boss of the game, he's the second to last boss, but still. Along with that, the lack of a second phase really hurts this boss in my opinion and makes it feel a bit too easy for a boss at the end of the game. Luckily though, the game makes up for all of these flaws in Radagon with the real final boss of the game, the Elden Beast that comes right after him, but I'll touch on him later. And overall, Radagon still is a climactic and epic battle, and I still really like this fight, earning it the number 17 spot. And now flying right on in at number 16, and at the top of Great Tier, we've got the Lich Dragon Fortisax. I've seen a lot of people who both love and also hate Fortisax, but for me, I've always had a really big soft spot for this guy, and I still do. Although for a boss as great as Fortisax, I've gotta wonder why From Software decided to hide him inside the Deep-Root Depths and only make him accessible after beating Fia's questline. The atmosphere of this fight is just spot on in my opinion. I love the way the arena looks, I love the music of the fight, and I just love the way Fortisax himself looks. He's just really cool. Fortisax isn't just all looks though, because he has some great gameplay to back the fight up as well. He's got many of the frantic swipes, slashes, smashes, and thrashing from dragons that you might expect, as well as tail swipes. His body is coated in red lightning, and red lightning follows many of his melee attacks, which can be very devastating if you get hit by it. He's also got some attacks related to red lightning in his arsenal. There's one where he summons it to strike the ground where you're at, however it's telegraphed in advance with red lightning particles appearing around you to warn you before it strikes. And he's also got the ability to create a red lightning spear, which he can then thrust into the ground, which sends out shockwaves after you. This attack can be especially dangerous if you're up close and personal with it, but as long as you get in the gaps between the shockwaves, you'll be all good. Speaking of getting up close and personal, that's basically what you'll have to do with Fortisax in order to be able to win the fight. He can breathe fire at you if you're at a distance, which will go through shields, which can be especially dangerous as it takes away a good chunk of health. And that's not even to mention one of his signature abilities, his ability to summon Deathblight lightning around the arena. He summons it in parts of the arena that are further away from him, meaning that as long as you stick close to him, you'll avoid most of it. But even if you're not close to him, the places where they shoot at are telegraphed in advance. You can see where they're about to strike, which makes it much more fair in my opinion. But even with that, Fortisax still has practically no delay to any of his attacks, and along with that, the attacks come out pretty quickly, which requires very good reaction time. All of this combined together results in a fight that feels both fast-paced and chaotic at the same time, but absolutely exhilarating. And once you get Fortisax down to about half health or so, he gains a new attack, which is one of the coolest boss attacks in the entire game. I don't even think I need to explain why that attack is just so damn awesome. On top of this as well, Fortisax's Lightning Spear move is modified to have 2 red Lightning Spears instead of just 1. My only real issues with Fortisax as a boss are just that 1, I wish he had a little bit more health, and 2, I wish he gained more attacks in the second phase. But honestly, that's my only real problems with Fortisax, and they're not even that big of a problem. So overall, I just love Fortisax in pretty much every regard, so I decided to put him at number 16.
I dreamt for so long. My flesh was dull gold, and my blood rotted. Corpse after corpse left in my wake. As I awaited his return. Heed my words. I am Melania, Blade of Mikola. And I have never known defeat.
Yeah, I know. I probably just triggered a lot of people's PTSD by showing that cutscene. I'm sorry, okay? But anyways, I think our number 15 spot, Melania, did a pretty good job of introducing herself. For a very long time up until the DLC released, Melania had the crown of being the absolute hardest boss in all of Elden Ring, and very understandably so. I still struggle with this fight a lot. Melania has many reasons that make her such a difficult fight, which range from being very well thought out and balanced to being questionable bullshit. And as a quick side note, with how Melania's fight plays out, she feels almost like she's not even in the right game. She feels more like a Sekiro boss than an Elden Ring boss. This fight is objectively not perfect in any way, and it's very flawed, and yet despite that, Melania stands out as a fantastic and memorable boss fight in my opinion. One of the most dangerous aspects of Melania is her speed and her agility. She is incredibly agile and will stay aggressive throughout the entire fight. Her movement also almost feels like some sort of dance with a rhythm to it, and I don't really know how to describe it other than that. At the same time as well, her attacks come out very quickly and with practically no delay. She's among the fastest bosses in the entire game, which makes reaction time extremely important. Her blade has quite a long reach as well, which makes it better to dodge into her attacks rather than away from them. The swings with her blade are extremely fast, and sometimes can come out so quickly that you can't even dodge the full combo. Some of her moves and combos are a little more delayed than others, but as a result tend to hit harder. Her thrusts also have more of a delay to them, but they have an extremely long reach, which means you have to dodge to the side instead of into them or away from them. However, she will occasionally have a break in between combos, which will let you quickly heal yourself up or sneak a few hits in. While these windows are extremely tight and few and far between, they are there and they do give you just enough time to keep going. Using Spirit Ashes can help out greatly in this regard, as it'll cause her to temporarily switch aggro to your Spirit Ash, giving you time to heal up again. All of this so far sounds like it's pretty manageable, although challenging. However, there's one unique thing Melania has that no other boss in the game does. It's a unique mechanic to her fight known as the lifesteal mechanic. Basically how it works is that every single time Malenia successfully lands a hit on you, not only will it damage you, but it will also heal her a little bit and restore a little bit of her health. This serves as extra punishment for getting hit and serves as another incentive to be careful with your dodge timing. I'm personally okay with the lifesteal mechanic, however I can definitely see why some people would be annoyed by it. But of course, I can't talk about Malenia's gameplay without bringing up probably the most infamous attack in her entire arsenal. You know the one, it's the waterfowl dance. I will give credit where credit's due, it does have a pretty long windup which lets you know that it's coming in advance, however, that's not really the issue I have with the attack. The issue I have isn't just that it deals a ton of damage either. The issue I have is that it's nearly impossible to be able to avoid if it's focused on you. The hitbox of the attack is extremely wide, and not just that, but she follows after you while performing the move. This makes it basically impossible to avoid the attack without just getting lucky. Aside from the waterfowl dance though, I really like the rest of Malenia's moveset. It feels very well done and requires very good reaction timing. It results in a really fun and fair duel, and I really like that. And plus, it feels extremely satisfying to finally beat her.
Wait. The scarlet bloom flowers once more. You will witness true horror. Now, rot.
Come on, did you seriously expect it to be that easy? As you could probably tell from that cutscene, just killing her once isn't enough because Phase 2 is where the real boss fight begins. Malenia starts out as being the blade of Mikola, her brother, and fighting on his behalf, but once you kill her for the first time, she ascends to become the goddess of Rot herself. In the story trailer for the game where we see her in the Battle of Aeonia fighting against Radahn, we witness her using a fraction of her Rot Goddess power. And this one single event not only completely changed Radahn forever into a mindless monster, but also transformed Caelid into the rotten wasteland it is by the time we arrive. And when we face off against Malenia, she brings the full power of the Scarlet Rot to bear against us in the fight. Her attacks become even faster, and she becomes even more aggressive during the second phase, and she has a lot of new moves in her arsenal. She gains the Wings of the Rock Goddess, which she uses during many of her attacks to fly in the air, and she starts out the second phase with a very powerful AoE which inflicts Scarlet Rot if you're in its radius. Her waterfowl dance move now also inflicts Scarlet Rot on you, which, okay, I will admit that is kinda bullshit. I don't know what they were thinking with that part. She's able to summon explosions of rot. She's even able to create clones of herself to briefly fly down and attack you, which is just awesome in my opinion, and I absolutely love that. And the list of her new attacks in the second phase could go on and on. She is by far the hardest of all of the Shardbearer bosses in the game, the hardest boss outside of the DLC, and one of the hardest boss fights in the game, period. But even if it's not perfect, Melania's boss fight is still absolutely incredible and well deserving of Legendary tier, earning her the number 15 spot.
Dearest Mikola, my brother, I'm sorry. I finally met my match.
Number 14, Rykard the Lord of Blasphemy. Rykard is another Shardbearer boss fight, and he is the main boss of the Volcano Manor, and he may be the most gimmicky boss fight on this list. However, just because a boss is gimmicky doesn't automatically mean it's bad, and if I'm being honest, Rykard is probably the best gimmick fight FromSoft has ever made. Phase 1 starts out with you facing off against the God-devouring Serpent. You'll find that the main gimmick of this fight is that the boss is immune to all damage at first until you realize you have to use a specific weapon to take it down known as the Serpent Hunter. This is a similar gimmick to the Storm King from Demon Souls as well as Yorm the Giant from Dark Souls 3. However, unlike those bosses, the God-devouring Serpent is able to completely fight back against you as well, making it feel much more like a battle than an interactive cutscene like those bosses. Most of its attacks are it trying to lunge at you and bite you, but it's also able to grab you in its jaws, which takes off a very big chunk of health. It's also able to spray poison mist at you, which fits with it being a snake and all, and if the poison builds up, it'll slowly sap at your health until the bar runs out. And you're also forced to stay at least a little bit of a distance away from the snake as well, because around its body there's a bunch of lava which does damage on contact. This takes abusing the boss's size completely out of the equation, and I actually kind of appreciate that. It feels like you genuinely have to develop a strategy for this fight instead of just cheesing the boss, which is really nice. Add in some earth-related AoEs where the snake lifts up earth from beneath you, and you've got a fairly solid moveset for a gimmick fight. And of course, once you manage to kill the boss, it's not over yet. Roll the clip.
Very well. Join myself and King as remedy. Together we will devour The very god.
Yeah, that cutscene wasn't terrifying in any way. Jesus. As you can probably see right now, Phase 2 is when we go from fighting just the god-devouring serpents to fighting the true Lord of Blasphemy himself, Praetor Rykard. The spectacle of the fight, which was already great in Phase 1, becomes even better in Phase 2, as it really feels like you're in hell and fighting the Elden Ring equivalent of the devil. Rykard's moveset expands greatly from the moveset shown by the god-devouring serpent. He has a variety of quick jabs as well as long and delayed swings from his blasphemous blade. The grab attack is now even longer and does even more damage. He's able to summon lava up from the ground in parts separate from just the area around his body. He's able to use a move known as the Taker's Flames, which summons fire around the ground whenever he slams his sword down. He's able to summon a giant miasma of fire cloud things, where he summons the spirits of champions he's devoured before you. The fight feels genuinely climactic and epic, and it's one of the optional bosses that I always fight on every single playthrough no matter what. Seriously, this is just a really good boss. And once you manage to finally kill Rykard for good, his post-battle dialogue is really unsettling. Rykard overall is just an incredibly cinematic, climactic, and thrilling fight, earning him the number 14 spot on the list. And right here at number 13, we have Star Scourge Radahn. Here we are, fighting the demigod that was once considered to be the absolute strongest out of all of them with no competition. That was until the Battle of Aeonia, where he ended up in stalemate with Malenia. Radahn is the one and only Shardbearer found within the Caelid region, and he has one of the most unique setups of any boss in the game. He's the only Shardbearer to not have a legacy dungeon leading up to him. Instead, he has a festival of combat being held in his name, where we are one of the champions of the festival. When you speak with Castellan Jaren before the festival begins, he'll give you a little bit of backstory as to how Radahn ended up in the pitiful state he's now in.
Celebration of war! The Radahn Festival!
Are you good and prepared, young chum?
The festival begins.
Before we begin, allow me to paint you the full picture. General Radahn is cursed ever to wander. Eaten from the inside by Malenia's scarlet rot, his wits are long gone. Now he gathers the corpses of former friends and foes alike, gorging on them like a dog. Howling at the sky. But now, we must make merry.
O gathering of champions! The revels begin! The celebration of war! The Radahn Festival!
In the fight itself, while you're able to take on Radahn completely solo, you aren't able to use Spirit Ashes. However, what you're able to do is actually summon the help of the other warriors of the festival, which makes Radahn the one and only raid style of boss fight in the game. Summoning the NPCs of course makes the fight easier, but this is one of only 2 bosses in the game where I actually think it's more fun to fight it with NPCs summoned. Facing off against Radahn with all of your comrades at your side really makes you feel like you're in an all-out war with the strongest of the demigods. And even with NPCs summoned, Radahn has a very deadly and versatile moveset at his disposal. He can make arrows rain down at you from a distance and try to shoot you at a distance using gravity arrows. He has a wide variety of combos using his Star Scourge greatswords, which are very large, have a very large reach, and can also deal a lot of damage upon successful attacks. When you get him to 2/3 health as well, he also buffs the greatswords up with gravity magic. Some of his combos can be very delayed, but other ones can come out very quickly and be difficult to avoid, and combining that with the gravity magic results in a very versatile moveset. This makes going for more than one hit at a time against the boss very risky, and you have to try and preserve your stamina the best you can. His gravity magic largely consists of many different AoEs, including one where he actually summons little projectiles which home in on the player and then suck them in on impact. And of course, we can't forget about his transition into the second phase, which is one of the most famous boss moments in all of Elden Ring. Ignore the fact that he killed me almost straight away, please. Just please ignore that. But as you could see right there, he begins the second phase straight away with one of his new moves, that being his Meteor attack. This is a very powerful and very devastating AoE attack which can very easily kill you upon the second phase beginning. During the second phase, his gravity magic arsenal expands even more. He can now summon up chunks of earth and sling them at you during the fight, which can be very difficult to avoid. He's able to leap and dive onto the ground, which sends shockwaves of gravity magic out from his blades. He now literally has the ability to leap and dive from the air back down onto the ground, and so on and so forth. It truly feels like you're fighting a living legend when you're fighting against Star Scourge Radahn, even if he is just a mere shell of his former self. And as a reward for killing Radahn, you gain access to several new areas such as Nokron the Eternal City, and I just really like that. And spoiler alert for the DLC, this isn't going to be the last time you see Radahn on this list. Adding further onto that, the next time you'll see Radahn, he's gonna be even stronger than he is right now. Overall, Star Scourge Radahn is just fantastic as a boss fight in every single regard, earning him the number 13 spot.
It's been a long while, Morgoth. Long and hard didst thou fight, tarnished warrior, spurned by the grace of gold. Be assured, the Elden Ring resteth close at hand. Alas, I am returned. To be granted audience once more. Upon my name as Godfrey, the first Elden Lord.
I don't think I need to say all that much to give Godfrey an introduction. If you've played the game, you probably knew that Godfrey was going to make it pretty high up on the list. You'll find Godfrey right outside the final boss arena at the Elden Throne right after returning to Leyndell after beating Malekith. And unlike the apparition fight from earlier in the game, this isn't some sort of ghost or illusion of Godfrey, this is the man himself. In Phase 1, his moveset is fairly similar to the apparition's moveset from earlier on, but with much more attacks. The combos with his axe are still present, but he now has more of them, which sometimes come out faster than the other ones. He's also able to jump up and then slam his axe down, and combined with that, he has another new AoE attack with his axe. Basically, he swings his axe down and embeds it in the ground, before then stomping onto it and then lifting it up to hurl a bunch of the earth upwards. The attack has a pretty good telegraph to it, but sometimes it can be a little tricky to spot until it already starts up. Speaking of AoE attacks, not only does Godfrey keep the same stomp attack from his apparition fight, which summons a bunch of spikes in front of him, but he also gains several new stomp AoEs which cause earthquakes throughout the entire arena that have to be jumped over. The timing of these AoEs can also vary drastically. It can be so quick to come out that you have to absolutely have good reaction timing to so delayed that it'll catch you at the end of your jump if you jump too early. And not to mention the fact that he's also able to chain these AoEs together one after another. This makes it so that the first phase of the fight absolutely has to be played defensively. However, Godfrey also gives you plenty of opportunities to recover your own health and stamina. This makes for a first phase that, while tough and dynamic, is completely fair and balanced. It fits with Godfrey, seeing how much honor he showcases to you. And lore-wise, Godfrey is honestly really great as well, as he was the first husband of Queen Marika the Eternal. He fathered Godwyn the Golden as well as Morgott and Mohg, and even though Mohg and Morgott were born Omen, he still treated them just like how he treated Godwyn even after they were shackled underground. And after Marika used him to help conquer the lands between, she ended up exiling him to the Badlands, causing him to become the first Tarnished. There is one little secret about Godfrey that I've neglected to mention so far. The lion on his back, Sarash, isn't just a visual thing. It's a beast he took upon his back when he was just known as Horalu, the warrior. This lion helps him suppress his bloodlust and his thirst for battle and make him a proper lord. In doing so, it seals away his full strength, but when you push Godfrey to his limits, this happens.
Sarash. I've given thee courtesy enough. Now I fight as Horalu. Warrior!
That's right, once you manage to best Godfrey in Phase 1, he completely abandons his title of being a lord and kills Sarash, becoming Horalu once again and releasing his full power. He also ditches his axe for his bare hands, and Phase 2 ends up actually being much more challenging than Phase 1. Not only does Horalu have more attacks than Godfrey, but his attacks are also wildly different. Godfrey in Phase 1 fought like a king and a respectful warrior, but Horalu instead fights much more like some sort of wild animal. Horalu is among the most aggressive bosses in the entire game, and he's the only boss in the game who never once moves away from the player and is constantly moving towards them. His melee attacks consist largely of him frantically swiping his arms at you, kicking you up into the air, stomping with spikes appearing in front of him, attempting to grab you, which does quite a bit of damage, leaping right up into the air and then jumping back down before pulling the earth up in a much larger version of his axe AoE from the first phase, while also changing up the timings for many of his attacks, which makes him very unpredictable. He also maintains his ability to do an Earthquake AoE attack, and not only does he mix it into various combos, but he's also able to chain them together faster than in Phase 1 too. The fight pretty much goes from being an honorable and tactical duel to a straight-up cage match where you have to have the ability to think on your feet. Stamina management in this fight is one of the most important things you have to keep in mind. You can't just waste stamina on spam rolling at all. You have to have your dodging absolutely on point, and along with that, windows to heal are extremely tight, which further incentivizes good dodging. Your windows to attack are a little longer than the healing windows, but are still extremely tight, making this also a very tactical experience, but in a different way to Phase 1. Fighting Horalu with no Spirit Ashes or summoned NPCs is among the most tense and anxiety-inducing experiences in the entire game, and I mean that in a good way. This fight is just pure adrenaline and fun, and I just love it for that exact reason. I also love that even as Horalu, Godfrey still acknowledges your strength and respects you upon you defeating him for good.
Thy strength befits a crown.
With everything having been said, a lot of you may be surprised to see that Godfrey isn't in the top 5 or anything like that. The reason why he's not up in the top 5 or anything isn't really because the fight is bad in any way. Really, I don't think there's anything that's wrong with Godfrey's fight. I just happen to like the bosses up ahead a bit more. I wouldn't personally put Godfrey as my number 1 or number 2 boss in the game, but I can definitely see why a lot of people would, and he's still a fantastic boss, which is why I put him at number 12. Okay, on someone's first playthrough of the DLC, Belurat's The Tower Settlement is likely to be the first Legacy dungeon they experience, and as such, this next boss is likely to be the first Remembrance boss of the DLC people find. So trust me when I say that this cutscene right here really left an impression on me because this was my first impression of the DLC's Remembrance bosses.
O horn-decked beast from higher sphere delivered, take root inside the tower's sculpted keepers, and perched within, we beg of thee, rise. Dance and kavod, cleanse all and go it. Cruelty, woe, and those who plague the tower. Cleanse away the strumpet's vile tyranny.
Yep, we've got the Divine Beast Dancing Lion right here at number 11. Right off the bat, I just want to say that this boss has one of the most unique and cool designs out of any boss in Elden Ring. Something about the way it looks and the way it moves just feels so creepy and weird and unnatural, and I just love it for that. The way its eyes just stare blankly with a green hue, the unnatural way it jumps and bounces around, the weird way its jaw seems to click and lock into place, it's just so weird. But then all of this makes perfect sense once you realize that the Divine Beast Dancing Lion isn't even a lion at all. It's not even a real living creature, it's two guys inside a costume operating it in a way that creates the illusion of it being a creature. It's just such a unique and awesome premise that hasn't really been done in a FromSoft game before, and I really like how they did it here. Despite its large size, the Divine Beast Dancing Lion is incredibly quick and agile. It'll often be leaping and gliding around the arena, as well as bouncing and thrashing around at you. It can also spray gray mist at you from a distance, which does damage on contact, and it's able to stand in place and spin around while doing so. This makes the Divine Beast Dancing Lion both dangerous at a distance and up close and personal, meaning you have to pay attention during the fight at all times. It can also literally fly through the air and spin towards you, which can be quite dangerous if you get hit by it. However, while the boss is winding up for an attack, or if it's finished executing an attack already, you can actually use its large size to your advantage by attacking it from behind or from the side. At the same time, though, you won't be able to just spam the attack button while it's winding up for or is finished executing an attack because the Divine Beast Dancing Lion moves a lot during the fight. This makes it so you're not really able to cheese the boss using this strategy, which is quite nice. The arena is also just the right size for this boss in my opinion. It's large enough for you to be able to actually fight the boss in a satisfying way if you're paying attention, but it's also small enough for the boss to be able to corner you if you're not paying attention. The bizarre movement of the Divine Beast Dancing Lion makes its moveset very difficult to learn for the first time, but also very satisfying to nail down. While the telegraphs for a lot of its attacks can be very weird, they're not unfair and they're designed perfectly in my opinion. The boss is also very aggressive, much more than a lot of bosses in the main game, which is pretty noticeable in most of From Software's DLCs when it comes to the bosses. However, even though the Divine Beast Dancing Lion is aggressive to the point where healing becomes quite risky, it's not to the point where it's impossible to heal at all. Once you've gotten the boss down to 2/3 health or so, that's when the second phase begins, and it is one of the most creative and unique second phases in the entire game in my opinion. In the second phase, the Divine Beast Dancing Lion has access to 3 different elements which each change up its moveset. However, it only swaps between these elements on specific music cues, meaning that the Divine Beast Dancing Lion really is dancing as you fight it, which is a nice little touch. It starts out Phase 2 by using lightning against you. When the boss is empowered with lightning, it's able to summon lightning throughout the arena, and its breath gets replaced with it shooting lightning at you. There are sparks of electricity which indicate that part of the ground is about to get struck by lightning, but it's still difficult to avoid the lightning. It also has the ability to literally throw a lightning bolt at you from its mouth, which then causes the ground where it strikes to be hit with lightning, meaning that just dodging the first little bit of the attack isn't enough. You have to dodge the lightning that comes afterwards as well. This here is ridiculously difficult. The wind-up to the attack where he throws the lightning at you is extremely quick, as with most of the lightning in this phase, and along with that, every single time I manage to dodge it, it always just feels like a fluke more than a genuinely good dodge. However, despite the common consensus, I don't really think the lightning phase is really all that unfair. Yes, it's very fast-paced and difficult to manage, but in a good kind of way in my opinion. The lightning phase of the fight is the trickiest in my opinion, but it incentivizes good reaction time, which I like, and it's just really fun. Once the lightning phase is done with, the element it chooses next will be random, but for me on this playthrough, I got Frost as the next phase. During the Frost phase, all of the Divine Beast Dancing Lion's stomp-related attacks will now have bits of frost come up from the ground as well. This means that now you can't get too close to the Divine Beast Dancing Lion, or else you'll get hit by the frost that comes up from the ground. This switches the focus of the fight from reaction time to positioning, which I really love. Although I will say the Frost phase tends to be a bit more annoying for me personally, but it's more of a nitpick than anything. What I'd recommend during the Frost phase is trying to keep as much distance between you and the boss as possible and avoid attacking it until it switches to the next element again. Or if you're using Spirit Ashes like I tend to, attack the boss while it's distracted with your Spirit Ash. It's also important to avoid spam rolling as much as you can during this phase of the fight, or else you'll definitely get hit by the Frost, which knocks off a very large chunk of health. Overall, I'd say the Frost phase of the fight is fairly enjoyable, but it's definitely my least favorite of the 3 elemental phases. But once the Frost phase is done with, it'll either switch back to the Lightning phase, or it'll switch to its 3rd elemental phase, Wind. During the Wind phase of the fight, the boss gains the ability to shoot gusts of wind at you from below, but it also has the ability to summon tornadoes in a spiral shape that it then sends towards you. Along with this, the hitboxes of the boss's attacks now also become much wider, which makes it so that now you have to perfect your dodge timing instead of positioning or reaction time. And of course, once the Wind phase is over, it switches back to one of its previous 2 elements. And let's also not forget the absolute banger of a boss theme that plays during this fight. Seriously, just take a listen. This is seriously among the best soundtracks in the game, seriously, it's just such a good song. Along with this as well, the Divine Beast Dancing Lion is just an incredible introduction to the DLC, and along with that, it's just a phenomenal boss overall. However, there is one unfortunate thing about the boss fight that's the only reason it's not at number 10 instead of number 11. And well, it's not really the fault of this boss, but rather the game developers. Cause you see, once you're finished with Ballarat, you'll eventually enter into the ancient ruins of Rao, where you'll come across a nice little surprise. Are you serious? Come on, this is the third time now! Seriously, come on. First it was Estelle, then it was Godric, now it's the Divine Beast Dancing Lion. This is getting ridiculous. Oh my god. Now, don't get me wrong, I love both the Divine Beast Dancing Lion as well as the Ancient Ruins of Rao. The Ancient Ruins of Rao is a really good and fantastic open world region in my opinion, but the thing is, the Divine Beast Dancing Lion does not fit with the environment here at all. It felt right at home in Ballarat and it should have stayed there in my opinion. And not to mention, there's no real reason that the Divine Beast Dancing Lion should be found here again. Like, it's already found in Ballarat. Why is it here of all places? Like, I get that there are multiple in the lore, but the thing is, if it were found in somewhere like Enir Ilim, which was a very important place to the Horn Scent, then it would make sense, but not here. Believe it or not, though, this is worse than just a reskin of the Divine Beast Dancing Lion. Oh boy. And guess what? This one actually manages to make the gameplay worse. You see, in this version of the fight, they decide to add one extra element to the second phase. Can you guess what it is? You know what, screw it, I'll just tell you. It's Deathblight. Yep, they added Deathblight to the second phase. And when it switches to the Deathblight phase, not only does its breath inflict Deathblight on you, but it also summons 6 basilisks in the arena as well, which constantly chase after you. And these enemies will spray clouds of Deathblight. And given that they're constantly trying to surround you, it's practically impossible to avoid getting Deathblighted. And if you need a reminder, if the Deathblight fully builds up, it'll instantly kill you. And by the time you manage to kill all 6 of the basilisks, the Divine Beast Dancing Lion will just summon more of them when it reaches the Deathblight stage again. Seriously, this is just a horrible idea. Nearly impossible to avoid clouds of a substance that will instantly kill you in a boss fight that constantly has the boss moving around with enemies spewing the clouds constantly trying to surround you is just... I don't know what they were thinking. There are very, very few times where I think that Elden Ring is actually unfair, but I really think this version of the boss is just complete bullshit. Seriously. This version of the fight it just pisses me off even thinking about it. Thankfully, it doesn't impact the original fight too much, but it does influence it enough for me to avoid putting it in the top 10, unfortunately. But anyways, I'm done talking about this version of the boss before I break something. Seriously, I hate this thing. And unfortunately, just like last time, I'm gonna have to cut the video short here because my editor only lets me make them so long, so yeah, I'm sorry about that. This means that I'll have to make a part 3 to this where I go over the top 10 bosses from Elden Ring. Don't worry though, this should be the last time that this happens. Again, I am really sorry. Trust me, if I knew this in advance, I would have let you all know. Seriously, I'm sorry. But anyways, I hope you enjoyed the video. I'm really excited to work on part 3 where I'm going to go over the top 10 bosses in this game because the top 10 bosses in this game, in my opinion, are among the best bosses out of any From Software game. So I'll look forward to seeing you all then, and thank you for watching. Peace out.